Okay, I think I'm going to do this one a little differently. I'm going to play the edited clips first, and then once we've been all the way through each play of the edited clip, we'll play the regular speed one after I've talked about it. And then hopefully when you're watching the regular speed one, you can see in real time where the number 3 in this case might have done something a little differently and maybe done a little better. But we're watching the red team this time, and we're watching the red 3 in the end zone. And their job in the end zone begins as soon as the other team gets possession of the ball. And right here, the pink number 3 has just snagged the ball out of the lineup. So she's actually in a good position to hold him there, and if she is holding him, it's appropriate for her to continue holding him until another player can hold him for her. But she doesn't like attempt to hold him. So now when he takes off, she's made one mistake here. If she's not holding him, and if she were holding him, this wouldn't be happening, but the number 3 should never let, as soon as their team gets the ball, should never let any opposing player get downfield of her. So she should have taken off to stay downfield of him, even him that has the ball there. Now he's slowed up, and so now she's gotten down in front of all the other players, which is she should be in front of all the other opposing players, but doesn't have to be very far in front of them, just as long as she's not there, none of them downfield of her. And so she should start looking for the number 1 and plan on how she's going to connect with him. And it looks like she is checking up here and looking back towards the number 1 who's in the gray shirt, or the light gray shirt, coming up kind of on her left side a little bit. So here she drifted a little bit too far, a little farther downfield than she needed to. And then here she starts to do something wrong. No matter how far she is down the field in front of the other people, she wants to stay parallel or facing straight up and down the field, not facing across the field, so she can come up flat against the number 1 as he gets up to her. But here when she turns crossways to the field and him, she's really putting herself in a not very advantageous position. So here we can't see her on the on the screen right there, but there she's gotten completely crossways to him, as if she were maybe going to try to keep him from getting to the end zone. As the number 3, you don't want to prevent their number 1 from getting into the end zone. You just want to make them go into the end zone as close to the sidelines as possible. But here, she's not only gotten in a weak position to keep him from getting downfield, but she's now kind of facing upfield of him, and it'd be easier for him to get past her, and then if he ever gets past her with the ball, she's behind, and it's very hard to catch up. So he does get kind of past her, but he slows down. Nobody was there to deliver the ball, so it's given our number 3 a chance to connect back against him. And what she wants to do is connect against him on his left side, the side she's going to, and just start pushing him over to towards the side of the field just as much as she can, so that when he goes into the end zone, he'll be as close as possible to the sideline. So here she gets back in position. Now she's in a good, strong position, and as he goes in the end zone, she's making contact with him, and she is right up against him. between him and the goal and almost crossways to the goal. So there, now, until he gets the ball, her job really isn't to keep him from going to the goal. Her job is to keep him going closer and closer to the sideline. And she got kind of more between him and the goal than the position she should have been in to continue pushing him towards the sideline. But she's still in a strong defensive position. And here she starts to make a mistake. She should be trying to keep him to one side, and it'd be to the right side of the field. So she's gotten out of position to do that, and now to try to stay in position or to stay between him and the goal, she's making a turn toward him when there's not clearance. And she kind of lucked out that he didn't make a move and try to take advantage of that. But right here, she's kind of making another mistake where he is stopped and waiting. She is also not continuing to improve her position. She should be moving sideways up against him. And every time they stop, the number 3 should never stop unless they're in the ideal position. So anytime the number 1 stops in the end zone, it's the opportunity for the number 3 to continue moving to improve their position. So she should be continuing to move sideways right up against him. And you don't want to ever let them get back to the middle. Once you have them to one side of the field, you want to keep them on that side of the field, even if they come out of the end zone. But she's letting him get back toward the middle, and she's a little bit behind to be in that ideal position. The number 3 always wants to be, if they get out of position, the first thing they want to do is get between the 1 and the goal. And once they're between the 1 and the goal, they want to get as close as possible to the number 1. And when they're between the number 1 and the goal and as close as possible, then they want to get their horse crossways to a line that would run from them to the goal. So here he comes across. She's a little behind again, but now he's changing sides. So she should have gotten behind him to keep him on now the left side of the field. But it looks like she's still playing between him and the goal and not concerned of which side of the field or whether he goes towards the corner or the side or not. And here, since she had him on this side of the field, she should step right up there in front of him so he can't get back to the middle right here. And it looks like she's checking back, just staying between him and the goal. And the way I want you to play is once you have them on one side of the field, don't ever let them back to the middle of the field, whether they have the ball or not. So she connects with him between him and the goal, right up against him. That part is good. And now, but he's gotten back to the middle and now going to the other side of the field. So she should be now concentrating on keeping him on the right side of the field. She's in a fairly good position to do that where she is right now. And she's putting her racket up, and she would have been much better off with both hands on the reins and not have your racket unless you're going to be picking up the ball off the ground. And there's not much you can do with your racket to intercept the ball when you're on the other side of the intended receiver. And so since she reached up for the racket, now she's gotten a little bit too much space between her and the number 1. She was right up against him until he reached out for the ball, and then when she reached up for it, she let her horse drift off of him a little bit. So she needs to be thinking on getting that horse sideways back up against him kind of urgently. And she's drifted too far forward now as he's checking up, where he's trying to turn toward her, and he may not actually have room to turn legally toward her, but it's enough room that they're going to let him. And it's because she overrode him. She didn't stop soon enough. And the reason she didn't stop soon enough is because she's trying to do just an offensive stop, just trying to stop squarely beside him, rather than a defensive stop, as is described in the book, where you, instead of stopping your horse on the hind end, you just fold your horse, pushing up against them as you're stopping your horse. And that would have prevented her from overriding him and him being able to turn toward her to make his next maneuver. So he does turn toward her, she overrides, and now she's slightly out of position. And when you're out of position, the first thing you need to do is get between him and the goal. She's kind of between him and the goal, almost. Then you need to get as close as possible to him, and she's not as close as possible to him. So from this position, she doesn't need to go forward anymore. She needs to be going sideways and bent, kind of making a horse move sideways so she connects with the front of this horse, hopefully so much that you can bend him and keep him from even getting back to the middle of the end zone. And there she drifted off again. She didn't have her horse positioned to be moving sideways against him at all. She had the horse's head turned just slightly toward the number one, and you probably noticed that the horse's body drifted away from the number one, and she wanted to be going towards the number one. So here she's gotten behind on that one move, and now she's making another mistake. Once you get behind and you've lost them, instead of trailing behind and going toward them from behind once you've lost them, just like a stride or two before this, she should have headed directly toward the goal. That would be the shortest distance to get her between him and the goal, and it would appear to him to be an open goal. But if she has started taking off straight to the goal and he runs towards the middle of the field, he may just shoot at what he thinks is open a goal. And a lot of times, if the number three had taken off running toward the goal, as soon as they got behind, they can be up there in time to interfere with the throw.
Ball in, just go turn it on. I don't count it. Okay, ball is in Nick's racket, and he's got three with Jared. Jared's watching it, and Nick makes it around the front. He's looking for his number one. Clayton's right there, waiting for a little pass in. Hannah's trying to get to him. Nice work by Kat, holding Hannah off. Nick gets a shoulder out in front. He's looking for Clayton. He lobs it out in front. Clayton snags it out of the air. Gets his horse turned around. He's looking at the goal. He's swinging it out in front. He does a backward throw all.
Okay, we're watching the red team again, and the pink number 3 has just picked up the ball in the opposing end zone. So we're watching the red number 3, who's kind of in the middle of the screen, and her number 1, her opposing number 1, is in the light gray shirt, just in front of her, kind of to the right of the screen, right at the 30-yard line. So their team has just gotten possession of the ball, so she wants to stay downfield of all the other players and connect with the one as soon as possible, and then make him enter the end zone as close to the sideline as possible. So she connects with him, but she's actually getting herself above or upfield of the dark gray player, And she's connecting with him to, as if she wants to prevent him from running down the field rather than to let him run down the field but make him run toward the sideline. But it's still kind of okay. But if you get them lost right then when they're just changing directions, once you get behind, you have all kind of trouble. So it's easier if you just try to keep them to one side of the field rather than try to prevent them from getting all the way down the length of the field. So here she's keeping him from coming downfield. They actually shouldn't let him step into the end zone to position himself for a pass, but they do. And it has gotten our number 3 upfield of the dark gray player, which she doesn't want to do. Our number 3 would be better off coming downfield of even the dark gray player and waiting for the light gray number 1 to be the farthest one downfield, even if it means he's open for a pass. It's just so risky to get held up by any other opposing player that it's not worth letting another player in front of you just continue marking up the number 1. So he does get the pass, and she was in an okay position, but she's even at this point getting behind. When he caught the pass, she was pretty much even with him, and she kind of stayed up against him. And so when he turned to go down the field, just the turning from her being almost even with him kind of put him in front of her. So her defending, instead of being up against him when he's facing crossways of the field, she should have been off of him slightly and facing her horse more downfield. So when he caught the pass and as he moved forward, she would be able to move forward past his leg and connect forward with him and control him down the field. But she connected too far back and he got in front, and then he wisely is actually veering more toward her, putting her even farther behind, and he's pretty much can be in control of her the rest of the way down the field if he wants to be. So here she gets behind, and once you're behind, there's nothing you can do. But since she's out of position, she should be doing these 3 things. First thing she'd be doing is trying to get between him and the goal, which means trying to pass him up, go faster than him, and pass him up. And about 3 strides before this, as he was checking up before the line, she also was checking up. As he was checking up before the line, it was her opportunity to actually get in front of him if she wanted to. But she actually checked up also as he was checking up before the line. And she would have wanted to get in front of him that once she's out of position. So as he makes his bounce, she could see right away that he's passed it up. And she should have stopped her horse and gone directly over toward the ball, but to put herself between him and the ball. And she's drifting her horse kind of forward down the field as if the horse won't stop and turn back. And I kind of think that horse would. But anyhow, it's a loose ball situation now, and her job is to go all out to prevent that number 1 from picking up the ball. And so here again, she's kind of trailing behind him rather than moving toward the front of him to connect front of him and push him off the ball. But so when he gets up to the ball, he has an opportunity to pick it up undefended, and he misses it. So she's going to get another opportunity here. So now, loose ball situation. She still needs to go all out to prevent him from picking up the ball, and she does it by picking the ball up herself.
Hannah trying to get to it first, but no. Nick makes a nice pickup. Chokes up on his racket. Hannah threatening all the time. Nick looking for some help. He's going to lob it into Clayton. It's going to be a horse race down the field. Clayton out in front on Freely. Here is Nicky coming behind on Tom. She's betting he can't make the bounce, and he cannot. Here we go. Good work, Victoria.
Okay, we'll be watching the red number 3 in the end zone, and right here, her opposing number 1 in the light gray shirt has just picked up the ball in midfield. So that's our red number 3 kind of at the top of the screen, farthest to the right of the pack. And their team just got possession of the ball. It is the number 1, and her job is to stay downfield of all the opposing players and connect up with the number 1 as soon as she can and make him go into the end zone as close to the sideline as possible. So here she's holding back a little bit too much. She's actually checking up there, and she should be trying to get forward of him. Even when she was kind of aiming toward him, like where she was looking to be aiming to go, it looked like she was looking too far back of him rather than looking and try to go to the front of his horse and actually control him. It looked like she was going towards the middle or near the back of his horse, maybe to swing at his racket. But anyhow, when she gets close to him, she is pretty much behind. And once she's out of position, what she needs to do is first get between him and the goal and then continue improving her position. So he's bounced it up really high, and for some reason she is checking and turning away from him. She was right up to his shoulder. I mean, her shoulder was right up to his horse's hip before he took the throw, and she should have been accelerating, trying to get forward of him. And when he threw it up, she should have been trying to connect with him, especially since he threw it, on her side. All she has to do is, be right up against him, and could have kept him from getting it. But I'm not sure why. But for some reason, just as he got up to the line and started throwing that ball, she starts slowing down and turning away from him. So the ball takes a wicked bounce, and they both pass it up. He goes way off, and she has no trouble getting her horse right back to it and getting back to the ball where she can pick it up undefended. Should be no problem. But for some reason, she leaves it on the ground. Now it's behind her. She is not between the ball and the number 3. It's a loose ball situation, and her job is to go all out to prevent that number 3 from picking it up, and she is just way out of position to do that. There's not really much you can do once you've gotten this far out of position. One thing you could do that it's not going to save you, but it may help you a little bit in some situations, is get in the habit of when you pass up the ball and you want to turn back to it, you turn away from the side the ball was on or the defender was on to get back to it. So as she passed it up, she should be turning back to it to her left rather than to the right. And so he goes up to it and is able to pick it up with no problem. Now he's got the ball in his end zone, and she is way behind. So her job is to, once she's out of position like this, get between him and the goal. And this is one of those instances where she's out of position, she's lost him, And her only way to really maybe interfere with him making a goal is to, from right here, run directly towards the goalposts. And if she would have started running from there directly towards the goalpost, as soon as he picked it up, and she's back up here in midfield, she would have had a chance to be up there by the time the ball got there if he did try to throw the goal. But she just kind of hangs around, and he comes around and shoots the goal unopposed.
It off to Nick, but they don't make the connection. Ball on the ground. Who's going to be first on it? Yes, it's Clayton again. Here's Victoria coming hard on. Zeta, high lob into the field this time. All right, first back on the ball. Oh, down in a hole, riding over the top. Clayton's got it, he turns, and he's going to make one go.
Okay, we're watching the red number 3 in this video, and the opposing number 1 has just snagged it out of the lineup. So her job working in the area begins right now. And she should stay downfield of all the opposing players and be planning to connect with her number 1 as soon as she can, and trying to work him toward the sideline. So another player is trying to pick her up, so she does the correct thing here by staying downfield of even that opposing player. As long as he keeps going down there, she needs to stay downfield of him, and she does that. And then finally, as he gets up at the 30-yard line, of course, he breaks off. Now she just needs to plan on connecting up with that number 1 as soon as she can, and try to encourage him to come into the end zone at the side rather than in the middle. So here, like turning left for her right there isn't bad, since he is so far away, which might encourage him to go to her right, which would put him more on the side of the field rather than coming toward her left side, which would put him right in the middle of the field. So that in itself wasn't so bad. You normally want to continue facing parallel with the field, always, straight down the field, and connect with him sideways. But since he's so far away, her turning away like that to the left might have encouraged him to go to her right, which would put him toward the side of the field. And she has enough time, he's far enough away that she has enough time to get back to him as he gets up to the 30-yard line. So now she's kind of doing something that's not as advantageous. She got him to commit over to the right side of herself and to the right side of that pink player. But she has stayed too far off. So as he started going over to the right side of the pink player, she should have been getting herself back equally as close to the pink player as the number 1 was to the pink player. And then as the number 1 kind of got past the pink player is actually helping her out by letting her get even closer to him, and the pink player would prevent the number 1 from cutting around the back of her. So she could make her approach to him closer than if the pink player was not there, and she would have to guard him, the number 1, from coming around to her back. But she's staying too far off right here. But as it turns out, they called a penalty on him for carrying it over the 30-yard line. So it didn't really matter that she was too far off. But you can see he had a lot of space once he got into the area that would make it harder for the number 3 to defend, rather than if she were right next to him when he went up to the 30-yard line.
Oh, snagged out of the lineup. Nice move by Clayton. He beats Hannah. moving downfield slowly. Nick's trying to pick up Victoria, but she's waiting in there. Clayton opts to go on the.
Okay, we're watching the red number 3 again, and the opposing number 3 has just picked up the ball in the other team's end zone. So, of course, the number 3 is not on the screen yet, but this is when her job begins, and her job will be to stay downfield of all the opposing players and connect with the one as soon as possible and be working the one toward a sideline. And that's the number 3 is way over there in the left side of the screen, and of course she's not downfield of all the other players. She hasn't connected with the one, and I think in this play she had dropped her racket or something, so she starts off behind here, but I don't even think she had her racket yet, and slows down even more to try to get another racket and never really gets up in front of all the other players or connects with the number 1. So she's already starting to check up, maybe because she realized she's so far behind, or maybe to pick up a racket from somebody else, but it's too late for her to get back up there and have any effect on the number 1.
Off the ball, she's working hard. Nick says, no, I got this. All right. Look at that pickup by the man in peach. Moving downfield. Victoria doesn't have a racket. She's getting lone one at the last second. Here we go, and it's a spire.
In this one, we're watching the blue striped team, blue striped number 3, and the opposing number 1 has just snagged it out of the lineup and turned away to go around the pack rather than going around the front. So our blue striped number 3's job is to stay downfield of all the opposing players, connect up with the number 1 as soon as she can, and work the one over to the side of the field as she gets up to the 30-yard area. So here she starts doing something that is not right. When she's waiting for the number 1 to come down the field to her, and that's what she should do, is wait for the one to come to her rather than going upfield after the number 1. So she should never get more than crossways to the field. She ideally wants to stay pointing straight down the field. So she could watch and let that player come up to her while she is still facing the goal. So she didn't need to turn past facing completely left at all. But certainly if she's going to turn, she wouldn't want to turn to where she's more than actually facing a bit upfield. And then here she continues going upfield after the number 1, and now is going to turn upfield even more as the number 1 makes her turn towards the side of the field. There, as she comes around now, an opposing player has seen our number 3 and is going to start marking him up, and our number 3 has gotten in a little precarious position, but she can still get out of it. Once she sees that somebody is going to try to get between downfield of her, like right now, she needs to start going toward the end zone rather than staying back to mark up the one or letting an opposing player that's trying to ride her off get in front of her. So that should be her priority, is staying downfield of all the players, because it is so risky if you ever get caught. You're in such a weak position. So give up connecting with the one if there's any chance that an opposing player can get downfield of you. So she didn't take off running straight down the field. She actually checked up a little bit as if she wanted to go towards the one again, which gave that opposing player that's trying to mark her off time to get in front of her and to connect with her, connect forward of her, so he has really got control of her here. So she really got into a very very weak position. But at least when he connected with her, she was able to knock him off his horse. So I guess she rescued herself pretty well. And then they actually stopped the play when he came off his horse.
All right, she throws it in and hits him in number 1. He's a serious player. He's got a Luis with the ball. He moves his horse downfield.
Okay, we're watching the red team this time, and the blue team has just gotten possession of the ball in midfield. That is the blue number 1 that's just picked it up, and the red number 3 is just behind her. I guess closest to the screen if you don't count the umpire. And I'll tell you ahead of time, in this clip, the number 3 does a whole bunch of things correctly. Not everything, but a whole bunch of things she does correctly. So watch this one closely. Okay, once their team gets possession of the ball, of course, her job is to keep downfield of all the opposing players, meet up with the one as soon as she can, and be working the one over toward the sideline as she approaches the end zone. And she starts off. She's marked up the number 1 right here, pretty well. She's got her close to this sideline, and she's marking her up to prevent her from getting down the field, which isn't necessary. But she gets concentrated on the number 1 and lets some other opposing players get downfield of her, which is very risky. So actually both the opposing players head on downfield of our number 3, who is holding the 1 way back upfield, and they're going to be off the screen for a while. And I would have just suggested that she not worry about keeping the 1 from getting downfield so much as staying downfield of the opposing players. Her teammates take care of the opposing players, so they're not really a problem for her this time. But you always are at risk of getting caught by an opposing player if you ever let one get between you and the goal. So here she's off the screen and holding the 1 way back upfield. The other team's carrying the ball down the field with nobody to throw it to, so they're having to mess with it, but gives the red team a lot of opportunity to work and maybe get the ball away from the ball carrier without it ever getting into the end zone. But when our number 3 comes back onto the screen, you'll see she's doing exactly what she's supposed to be doing. She's got the number 1, letting them get into the end zone, but making them go into the end zone right at the sideline. And that's exactly what you want to do as a number 3. So now she's even downfield of all the opposing players. The number 1 gets up to the end zone right in the corner. And you can see, even if the number 1 did get a pass right there, our number 3 would be in a very good position to keep her from scoring a goal. And here, our number 3 makes a little mistake and overrides the number 1. Instead of just holding her towards that sideline, she's slipped too far forward and now let the number 1 face the middle of the field, even kind of the goal. But you don't even want them to get back to the middle of the field. Once you have them as far to the side as you can get them, you don't want them to come back any farther towards the middle of the field. And here she didn't seem to get right up there very quickly, as if she's not trying to keep her towards the side of the field. She does get between her and the goal very well, and then is kind of casual about it and lets the one push her over, so the number one is gaining some ground, some maneuvering room, getting back towards the middle of the field. So as long as our number 3 stays as between the one and the goal, as close as possible, and crossways to the goal, she's still doing correctly, but she could have done better by getting a little more forward of the one and preventing the one from pushing back towards the middle of the field. But she's still in the very correct position up until right here. As the one now tries to turn away, it looks like our number 3 is going to turn toward her, which I do not recommend. So she turned toward her, probably even went across her horse's butt. Of course, they don't call it. And now she is getting back into her best defending position. Between the one and the goal, as close as possible, and crossways to a line that would run from her to the goal. She's kind of in all the correct positions here, except she should be a little bit closer to the number one. She should be stepping her horse sideways towards that number one. And you see, the one thought she had enough room to turn toward her. Of course, it's an illegal turn. They shouldn't have allowed it. But that, she still did made the turn. And if our 3 had been actually a little bit closer to her, maybe she wouldn't have even made the illegal turn. But she made that turn, and our 3 right now is not in the strongest position yet, hasn't repositioned herself into the strongest position yet. And if the one were on a crafty horse, she may be a little bit behind, but she is able to catch up and get back in her good position here in a second. So now she has gotten back up against the number between the one and the goal, close as possible, and crossways to the line that would run from her to the goal. And now, as the number 1 is fixing to turn left, it looks like our number 3 is going to turn away from her, and that is appropriate if you're going to make that turn. So there, the 1 turns and actually catches the ball, and right here where our 3 made the turn, she actually stayed off too much. She should have been making that turn and continued making the turn to come sideways right up against the number 1. And I think she had plenty of time to do it. But right at this position, she is between the 1 and the goal, but she is not as close as possible. So she needs to be trying to improve that as soon as she can before the 1 takes advantage of it. And what the 1 would do to take advantage of it, since our number 3 is committed all the way to the right, there's room to turn toward her. The number 1 would sit and turn left the way our number 3 is not facing. But the number 1 does kind of try to turn, and even at those times, our 3 was staying too far off. She walked forward, and while she was walking forward, she could have easily been walking up against the number 1 also, and she didn't. Although the 1 didn't take advantage of her while she's out of position, she is still not quite in the ideal position. So our 1 gives up, making that to him, and our 3 had another chance again to take a step or 2 toward the 1 and didn't do it. Now, as the 1 is turning away, if our 3 should turn away also, and our 3 is turning away a little bit faster than she should. the number 1 is farther, the number 3 is farther around the turn than the number 1 is, and what happens a lot of times, the number 3s actually turn themselves out of the way, and the number 1s get a chance at the goal. So you don't want to be turned any more than the 1 is turned, which means you don't have to get in a hurry to do it. And here she's just a little bit farther around. Our number 3 is a little bit farther around the turn than the number 1 at this point. So she slowed her turn down though, and now she has an opportunity to come sideways up against her, and she wants to get up against her to not only keep between her and the goal, but don't even let her back toward the middle of the field. It would still be correct to just stay between them and the goal and close as possible and that sort of thing, but it's even better if you can also keep them from getting to the middle, back to the middle of the field. So she's stayed off there a little bit more. She should be moving her horse sideways up against as she's trotting up there to keep in line between the 1 and the goal. And I would have preferred that she actually got so much forward of her that when she connected forward of her, the 1 could not go back towards even the middle of the field. But she's still very correct, staying between her and the goal. She's just a little bit not as close to the 3, to the number 1 as possible at this point. So here she maintains staying a step off rather than right up against her, where it looks like the number 1 thought she could even turn toward her. But the number 3 does an amazing thing here, which she knocks the ball out of the number 1's racket without even swinging her racket. So just being in the correct position many times is going to cause the number 1 to drop the ball, just like it did here. Just her being in that good position caused the ball to come out of the number 1's racket without the 3 ever having to swing.
And he's going to try picking up the ball. And Kat comes up with the ball. She's looking for her sister. And Liz is going to try holding off the player off the Kat. Kiki's trying to get down the end zone, but Tally Thompson is doing a heck of a job as a 3, sticking with her 1 and giving her lots of pressure so she can't get down the end zone. Kat's going around in circles, trying to find Kiki to get the ball to her. And Paige and Renee come up and block the pass. They're trying to get the ball out of her racket again. Kiki's trying to get open. Kiki receives a nice pass from Kat. Kiki's trying to get that horse moving. The horse is thinking about it. And she's going to kick that horse, and she's thinking about it. She's going to tease Tally, and she drops the ball. Tally's got to try to pick it up. Tally comes up.
We're watching the blue team this time. The blue number 3 is at the very top of the screen, and the opposing number 1, the black number 1, has just picked up the ball, still in midfield, and the black number 1 wants to score at the left end of the screen. So our number 3 needs to stay downfield of all the other players, working on her connection, and try to connect with the 1 as soon as possible and keep her to one side of the field. Now, one thing she did here, the number 1 was coming along pretty much over to the left side of the field. And our number 3, instead of staying back enough to keep the number one going towards the middle of the field. She kept going forward, giving the one more opportunity to switch sides, and she did actually switch sides. So by the time she gets to the end zone, she's almost at the middle of the field. And our number 3 right here is kind of far away from her, and there's no reason she should have been that far away from her. I mean, she wasn't being blocked or marked up by another player. As she approaches the end zone, our number 3 should be right up against her. So there she goes in the end zone, and once again, our number 3 has just stayed off there. She had several opportunities to be, as soon as she started making her turn, to start moving her horse sideways to get closer to that number 1. But now that the number 1 has the ball in the end zone, our number 3 is pretty far off, where the number 1 is actually in a pretty strong position right here. So here, our number 3 starts moving toward the number 1, I assume, to close the gap. And that's okay. You need to be very careful when you turn toward the player. But if you turn toward them to close the gap, you need to make sure that you get yourself at least crossways to the goal by the time they get crossways to the goal as they make their turn. So there she is, and the number 1 is crossways to the goal, and our number 3 has gotten crossways to the goal in time. So by turning toward the number 1 to close the gap this time, the number 3 did okay and did not get out of position, but closed the gap a little bit, or started closing the distance between her and the number 1. But then, as she made that turn and got crossways to him, she should have, she needs to stay between the 1 and the goal as close as possible and crossways to the goal. And she's pretty much between her and the goal, but stepped kind of away. Instead of closing the gap distance, stepped kind of away to give her more distance, and it would have been better to step toward her and forward of her, so she couldn't have gotten back to the middle of the field. But as long as you stay between them and the goal, you still should be in a pretty good position, as long as there's not enough space between you that they can turn toward you. So here she's staying off a little too much again, and then as the number 1 starts turning away, our number 3 is starting to turn toward her again. Once again, if she's doing that to close the gap, that's okay. She just needs to make sure by the time the 1 is crossways to the goal again, she's also crossways to the goal. So here the number 1 continues to turn, and she's actually going slow. There she is, crossways to the goal, and our number 3 is also crossways to the goal, so that one she did fine. She's just a little more forward than she needs to be, and she actually could be moving sideways toward her rather than just moving straight and parallel with her. So here she comes across the other side. Our number 1 is a little bit too far forward and not close enough. And all these strides, she's been just running parallel straight across the field. She could have been moving towards the side of the field, but also sideways to close that gap between the 1, so the 1 couldn't turn toward her. And now it looks like the number 1 has room to turn toward her, because she's got so much distance, and she's also a step too far forward. And the more distance you have between them, the less space you're blocking, so it's easier for them to get past you. It's easier to be out of position if the farther away that you are, the more space you let them have between you. So here she's still gotten too far forward, and she makes another, it's a mistake in my book, that she is making her turn toward her. Anytime you make a turn toward her, you know you're going to get behind. So if you end up making a turn toward them, you need to really jump out of it and try to recover and get back, or to regain your good position. And there she almost gets back in position. She gets in position enough that the number one doesn't try to shoot the goal. Here she's about half a step too far back to be between the one and the goal, and she's reaching over to swing at the number one's racket, so she's not getting her horse up against the number one. And here, as the number one goes over the left side of the end zone, you do want to shift back a little bit. Our number three is a little bit farther back than she should be. You want to shift back so that you maintain your horse between the number one and the goal. And our number three here is just a little bit far back. And if you think you're so far back that they're going to have a shot at the goal, the thing to do is turn away from them and turn directly to the middle of the goalpost and run directly towards the middle of the goalpost. But I don't think our one is going to try to make this shot. So once again, our number three swung at the number one's racket, and that's going to cause her to not check her horse in time and override as our number one turns. So she's gotten considerably out of position, and the thing to do when you're out of position like this, the only way to recover is to run directly to the middle of the goalposts. And it looks like she's heading that way rather than heading back up here toward the number one, which would let the number one catch the front of the number three and let the one bend the three towards the goalpost. She is seems to be right now heading toward the goalpost. That will put her back between the one and the goal the quickest way, and then she can, if she doesn't take the shot, she can try to improve her position from there. So there she goes, and as she saw that the one wasn't heading toward the goalpost, our number three starts coming back towards the one. Now she's still between. Now she's gotten herself between the one and the goal, so she's in that part of position. Now she needs to start trying to get as close as possible to the number one, and it looks like she's doing that by facing her or heading her horse toward her. And the number one is crossways to the goal right now. So our number three is already in a risky position since there's so much space between them, and our number one is pretty much facing away from the goal. The three is facing away from the goal. The number one could just turn and shoot it. So the one doesn't take that shot. The number three still is facing her, and I guess trying to close the gap. And here the number one is already turning more than crossways to the goal and is starting to face the goal, and our number three is facing away from the goal. So our number three has gotten into a very weak position here, and the number one should be able to get past her pretty easily and get a shot. But the one just kind of doesn't aggressively try to get around her, and is giving our number 3 a chance to almost close the gap. So right here, the number 1 has a chance to get back in the ideal position. The number 1 is almost crossways the goal. Our 3 is still facing away from the goal a little bit, but she has an opportunity to get right up against the number 1 and be in that good blocking position again. So there she's, our 3 takes a swing at the racket, getting a little bit out of position. So here, when she reaches around for the backswing, she gets even more out of position. And so if the ball doesn't come out of the racket, the number 1 should have an easy time getting past her. So the number 1 still hanging onto the ball. Number 3 has gotten out of position and is about to get even farther out of position as she tries to turn toward, because she's going to try to turn toward the number 1. If she is this far out of position where the 1 should be able to run and shoot a goal, she'd be better off just turning left, heading straight towards between the goalposts, and then if the number 1 doesn't take the shot, then improve her position, kind of like she did a while ago. Well, the number 1 didn't jump out of that and take advantage of that out of positionness, and now our number 3, even by turning toward the 1, has an opportunity to regain her perfect marking up position. She needs to turn a little bit to the right and jump forward and connect just forward of that number 3 to be in that perfect position. But she stays off, lets the number 1 get in front of her, and even at this point right here, our number 3 does not have control of the number 1 and really should not be able to prevent her from heading toward the goal. So even from this point, our number 3 would be better off not following the ball carrier, but turning to go directly between the middle, towards the middle of the goalposts, and if the 1 takes the shot, she might be there in time to deflect it. But she doesn't go straight to the goal, and she is behind, and the number 1 does try to take advantage of that and gets a shot at the goal.
Couldn't handle it. Lyric comes up with the ball. Lyric looking around out there, waiting for her chance to get into the end zone. She finds a spot, makes her bounce, captures it nicely. Take a shot on the goal. She's got to get away from that here, Chrissy Rebel. Looking forward, trying to get that horse to move forward. Well, this horse goes sideways. Takes a shot, chop at her, couldn't take much of it. Lyric is looking to get that horse moving forward, but Chrissy is all over, swinging. And she finds a spot